What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40k. This one, we have the entire battle between Jagdai Khan and Mortarion during the Siege of Terra in his very own novel entitled Warhawk. This battle is really brutal, and it is a battle of attrition between Jagdai Khan, who is just going all out against the demon Primarch Mortarion, and we can see just how much powerful a Primarch is when he has ascended to godhood. But that doesn't mean that Mortarion is out. So let's go ahead and dive into this battle to see who comes out the victor. It was a mistake to think back, because both of them had changed so much. The Lord of Death had burst free of his old bounds, becoming grotesque and monstrous. He wore a human form only in outline now, his skinny body inhabited by a ramshackle armor of corrosion and decay, a gaggle of loosely held panels and moldy fabric, seemingly liable to fall apart at a moment's notice. The air around him was acrid, suffused with a foulness that turned the stomach and made it hard to breathe. He was ruined and yet exalted, crippled yet stronger than he had ever been. So the old encounter meant little. Then it had been a matter of speed against intractability, and either approach could have emerged victorious. Now, though, the parameters had changed. Mortarion's brute strength had grown obscenely. The warp coursed thickly through his veins, pulsing under heavy mutated skin. Whenever he moved, reality flexed around him, recoiling at the volition of natural law. His great blade displayed reflections of the hell realm beyond, its rotting gardens, its tormented flesh, and its fertile pain fields. What did he, the Khan, have to set against all of that? The old prowess with the blade, some fine armor, the residue of famed quickness. Not enough. He had his hatred, though. That was different from before. On Prospero, the discourse between them had been regretful, as much as anything, both of them disappointed at what was being thrown away by the other. Now his hatred was as infinite as the void. Too many had died at Catalyst for it to be any other way. His warriors, his ships, his counselor, all swallowed up by the monster before him, all owing their deaths to this single soul. The Khan had that. He had his rage, deep as the world's core, fueling every strike and swipe of the great dowel blade. He had the keen edge of vengeance to propel his limbs, to find the chink that could wound this horrific amalgamation of post-human and yaksha, to keep going against the impossible. They crashed together, then crackling at the stone underfoot as they braced against it. The white tiger snarled itself on silence, releasing an explosion of mingled forces, and they both pushed against the other, testing strength and poise, feeling the harmonics in their weapons and gauging what it meant for the strength of their bearers. The Khan fell back first. They exchanged more blows, rapid, heavier, faster. All around them the roar of a broader combat filtered up from the decks below, a chorus of screams and explosions that could not be filtered out. The strikes accelerated, ramping up swiftly until the blows were exceptional in their heft and precision. The whistling arcs of the scythe hissed with unearthly voices, wounding the atmosphere itself, even as the Khan ducked away from its lacerating edge. When that warp-forged steel connected, the impact was bone-breaking, mind-jarring, a collision of dimensions as much as solid matter. "I expected you to dance," the Death Lord grunted, hammering the Khan back further. "Lost your footing as well as your judgment?" The Khan was already breathing heavily. The going was as hard as expected. Harder, maybe. He worked his blade rapidly, its edge losing definition as the point whirled faster than thought. The scythe method in explosions of plasma and ceramite shards, swinging heavily, crackling and hissing with imprecations of half-formed demonic choir. "You are already defeated," the Khan told him. "You have become what you hated." Mortarion snarled. Some hatreds were never worth pursuing. Tell yourself that. It helps. The acceleration continued. The blows became denser than true mortal frames could ever have propelled. The combatants smashed in close, then reeled away into one of the gallery's columns. The masonry cracked apart, driven into disintegrating dust clouds as the Primarchs crunched their way clean through it. The Khan's armor took its first transverse slash, ripping the finery from shoulder to waist. Blood flowed the path of the strike, splattering against the deck in black pools. They were alone now. They had entered a world of exclusivity, a level of combat that no other being, Xenos or human, could ever hope to match. Just to witness it, to try to follow it, was to invite a kind of madness. The Primarchs kept themselves tightly under control almost all of the time, wearing the trappings of mortality over their true natures. When they cast that off, they have unlocked their inner selves. The result was difficult even to watch, let alone intervene. Time has been cruel, Jagtai, Mortarion said, still calm and still fighting within himself, crackling the Khan away again and again, smacking the gold chasings from his helm and rocking his head back. You are not what you were. I am what I always was, the Khan snarled back. Weak, loyal, it's all the same. The two of them barreled into the gallery's external wall, hammering at one another so fiercely that the entire section collapsed as if torpedoed. They swirled and dueled through the tumbling rubble, then out into the exposed night air, completely absorbed now in their own private contest. The rest of the planet, the rest of existence, might as well have slipped away. But that violence only ratcheted up, every second, ticking over, more. Mortarion nearly took the Khan's head clean off with a vicious diagonal swipe. Silence's curved tip carved a 3-foot deep trench into the deck, then pulled out again, and it ripped up a whole clump of static wreathed rockcrete. The Khan shouldered through the barrage to land a spiteful cut on the Demon Lord, stripping the pox-riddled armor clean from the flesh and taking his first blood, before being hammered back. For me, this isn't about revenge, said Mortarion. You're just in the way now. Do you understand that? The Khan laughed bloodily, spitting out shattered teeth. Not how I see it, brother, he hissed. I am here for you and nothing else. Mortarion backhanded him, cracking a savage hit into the Khan's throat before following up with a two-handed down thrust of the scythe. Indulgent, but you always were. Another smack against the helm, a discharge of virulent nerve gas as the edge bit, the destruction of the Khan's right pauldron. This made him stagger. I led my legion as I saw fit, the Khan snarled. You might have tried the same. The white tiger flashed, going for the jangling cables at Mortarion's neck, but it was swatted aside. I led the death guard before you were even found. The Khan held his ground against the onslaught, muscles screaming as they propelled his blade into dazzling arcs. Sweat pooled across his burning skin, mingling with blood now. Not sure your first captain would agree. That unleashed the flood. Mortarion roared back at him, his gossamer wings rearing up as his mighty arms flailed, furious and devastating. He crunched and bludgeoned the Khan out across the face of the landing stage, wreathing him with plumes of poison, smacking the metal off of his gauntlets, cracking his flanks with the shaft of his either snarled staff, before plunging the curved edge back round and up into his torso. To endure that at all, not only to be completely swept away and broken into 1,000 pieces, took every scrap and skill and tenacity that the Khan still possessed. By that point, he was fighting beyond anything he had ever achieved before, scraping the boundaries of the possible, and still he was being battered, bruised, hammered, driven across the storm-racked port's edge like a churl being beaten by his lord. His head rang from the blows, clouded with blood puffs as his skull rattled in its helm. His right arm was now fractured, his flank lacerated, his cheeks shattered. Silence swung around him like the wheeling stars, its length crackling with vicious energies, both faster than a warp snarl and heavier than a star's heart. "You know nothing," Mortarion snarled, rearing up again, his cloaks whipping about him as the storm surged howled. "Nothing of sacrifice, nothing of denial. You were the spoiled child, whining about the need for structure as the rest of us built an empire." Mortarion's eyes flared with a maddening green tinge, his visible face twisted into a true rage now. He was elemental, he was apocalyptic, he was phenomenal. The tempest shrieked around him, hurled into a vortex that amplified every killer's strike, tearing up the ground that they scored across the sending of its remnants, slamming and blasting across the Khan's retreating form. You were shown the nature of the galaxy, and you turned it away. Mortarion raged, slamming the scythe down and nearly breaking the Khan's trailing leg in two. "I embraced it. I embraced the pain. I looked the gods in the eye." The tempest of Horus's wrath swirled overhead. Explosions kindled far below, creating constellations of plasma across the port's ruins. Further out, visible only to a Primarch's vision, the beleaguered inner palace burned, too far for any intervention now. Unholy voices whined in the superheated wind, goading, crowing, delighting. "And you ran," Mortarion spat, "always running, too far away to matter, principles unknown even to yourself." The scythe swung up again, even heavier now, unstoppably fast, critically heavy, driving over the Khan's desperate attempt to block it, connecting with armor-cracking force and sending the Primarch skidding to his knees. More blows rained in, iron hard, exploding with the soul-eating spoil of the ether, smashing him down lower until he was on his back against the rockcrete, prone, ready for slaughter. There is no running now. The Khan's head snapped back, and blood sloshed down his neck. He had a brief glimpse of the skies above, hiding the monstrous fleets above, before Mortarion's profile loomed up to block it. And then the dream came true, just as Yegusei had described it to him. The Lord of Death, rising in darkness over a world of shadow, arms raised for the killing strike. "Not everything is fated," the Khan had told him. "It ends," Mortarion said, his face a rictus of anger. "Here." The Khan chuckled painfully under his shattered, lensless helm. "See, but I'm laughing now, brother," he rasped, the thick blood in his throat making his words gurgle. "You should start to worry. He should have been dead. It should have been over a long time ago, with Jagtai nothing more than a smear of Tom skin and armor fragments on the floor. And yet, impossibly, he was still alive and fighting back. His arms must both have been broken, his fused ribcage cracked to ribbons, his sword notched and blunted, and yet he came back, again and again. It was becoming almost painful to watch. The Primarch of the Fifth, on his knees again after being smashed halfway across the open landing stage, struggling to get back up. The blood trailing from every armor seal was so profuse that you wondered how much more of it there could still be inside him. Entire sections of his ivory plate hung loosely on sinew-like straps, flapping as he staggered around. And through it all, he kept talking. He kept up the torrent of petty jibes and slights, even when Mortarion rained blows at his dented helm, smacked him deep into the broken-up rockcrete. The barbs kept on coming, sometimes acid, sometimes brutal, sometimes merely juvenile. "Just take the damned mask off. I want to see your expression when I kill you. Your stench is worse than at Ulanor, and it was putrefying then. And that one cut deep. I should have taken on the Legion Master. I should have fought against Typhon." It was childish. It was beneath them both. Mortarion was beyond anger by then, and had progressed into a kind of contemptuous wariness. Greater things beckoned. This petty brawl should not have mattered. It should not have been happening still. Power pulsed through his system like raw promethium. The warp still animated his every gesture. His army still had their ground against a faltering White Scar's attack. But this was becoming infuriating now, a maddening bump in the road that just would not clear. So he swung his fist back into it. 2 great strides, a gathering of momentum, and then a truly brutal backhand slash with silence that tore Jagdai's helm clean from his head and sent his body arcing high. The Khan crashed to the deck again, flat on his back, somehow keeping a grip on his fragile blade even as Mortarion surged over him, slamming his staff's heel into his enemy-exposed midriff. Jagdai managed to twist away at the last moment, only for Mortarion to plant a vicious kick against his face, breaking both nose and cheekbone. Half blind and groggy, Jagdai lashed out with his blade, connecting with silence and wrenching it from Mortarion's grip, letting the staff clatter away. Mortarion dropped down sharply, piling in wildly with his gauntlets, slamming in punches at the Khan's throat, his chest, his ruined face. The clenched fists flew one after the other, barely warded by Jagdai's flailing arms, tearing up the remains of that beautiful lacquered ceramite and splattering the 2 of them in more gouts of forge-hot blood. But the Khan never stopped fighting back. But it was becoming pitiful now. He caught one of Mortarion's fists on the full, only for the other to plunge deep at his stomach, bursting something within Jagdai, who tried to rise. And then Mortarion cast him down disdainfully, fracturing his spine. They were both roaring by then, Mortarion from frustrated fury, the Khan from undiluted agony. They had been reduced to this, brawling across a derelict spaceport like Hive World gangers, gouging and tearing at the body before them, trying to rip it apart with their own fingers. Scions of the Emperor, masters of the galaxy. Panting hard, feeling like his heart was fit to burst, Mortarion finally ceased a barrage. The first ache of exhaustion rippled up in his arms. His vision shivered a little. Still something mortal in him, after all. Something that could know fatigue. He got up painfully. Jagdai still breathed, somehow, amid the swamp of gore that had once been a proud visage. The air was still being sucked in, bubbling feebly amid floating flecks of bone. Mortarion limped over to his scythe, hauling it up again, making ready to end the grotesque spectacle. "I thought you'd dance," he said again, genuinely mystified. "You just took it. Did you lose your mind?" Jagdai started to cough, sending more bloody spurts over the ripped arc ground. His shattered gauntlet still clutched the hilt of his blade, but the arm must have been broken in many places. Only slowly, as he trudged back, did Mortarion realize the sound was bitter laughter. "I absorbed," Jagdai rasped. "The pain." Mortarion halted. "What do you mean?" "I know," Jagdai said, now his voice a liquid slur. "The terminus est. You gave up. I did not." And then he grinned, his split lips, his flayed cheeks, his lone seeing eye, twisting into genuine spiteful pleasure. "My endurance is superior." So that was what they all believed. Not that he had done what needed to be done, not that he had sacrificed everything to make his legion invincible, even suffering the ignominy of using Gallus as his foil, even condemning himself to the perpetual soul anguish of demonhood, so that the change could never be undone by anyone, not even his father. That he had been weak. The dam of his fury broke. He hefted silence, two-handed, angling the point towards the laughing Khan, no longer thinking of anything but sending its tip spearing through his enemy's chest. And so he missed the Khan's suddenly tightening grip, the flicker of white steel, the rapid push from the deck, and the upthrust of the masterful blade. The white tiger penetrated deep under the single segment of Mortarian's armor plate that the Khan had managed to dislodge. It bit deep, sending a flare of pain straight up into his straining torso. Silence's strike missed its aim as he jerked clear from the blade. Mortarian reeled away, blood leaking from the deep wound, and then, to his incredulity, the Khan was clambering back to his feet again, still bleeding, still damaged, but already coming towards him. Mortarian, suddenly doubting even the evidence of the senses, staggered back into contact, doing just what he had done before, charging straight in, thrusting his colossal strength, and only then realized how drained to the bone he was by what had gone before. And then, the Khan started to dance, not with beauty that had been ripped from him, but still with that unearthly slipperiness, that mesmerizing power of apparent to be in one place, inviting the strike only to be a hand's width away, just enough to drop under your guard and slice a piece of you away. He could still do it. He still had something left. "When we do this with our ships," the Khan growled, no longer laughing, now deadly serious, "we call it Zao, the chisel." Mortarian swung his scythe clumsily and missed. The dowel blade struck him again, carving a deep rent along his trailing arm. The change was mesmerizing. The Khan was still on the edge of death, just one good impact from annihilation, but he was moving again, faster and faster. His Primarch physiology did what it was meant to do, kept him alive, kept him in the fight. Mortarian snarled, worked his scythe harder again, feeling his fatigued muscles scream even as his mind reeled from the realization. He should have seen through it. He should never have allowed himself to become goaded. Their blades clashed again, snarling in an explosion of mingled warp detonations, and the two of them both reeled away from the blow, barely able to keep to their feet. He was damaged. That had hurt him, and the Khan came back quicker, his smashed ankles somehow propelling him across the erupted ground faster than Mortarian could react. When the dowel clanged against the scythe again, the blood splattered freely, but it was no longer just Jagtai's. Mortarian swiveled on his heel and smashed the Khan away. That sent the Primarch tumbling, but he came straight back at him again, lurching from his catastrophic injuries as if drunk, his devastated face etched with excruciation, but still fighting through the toll of fearful damage. It was as if some malevolent spirit animated him now, pushing the ravaged body onward until it achieved the absolution it needed. The sword spun faster, blurring across Mortarian's double vision, getting difficult to stop. The two of them traded earth-breaking blows, tearing more of their priceless battle plates from up. The sword spun faster, blurring across Mortarian's double vision, getting difficult to stop. The two of them traded earth-breaking blows. Their cloaks were ripped to shreds, their finely destroyed, the raw selves exposed in blood-modded canvases of skin, stripped muscle. Their pretentious scoured back to the primal truth, that they were savage weapons, the numbered blades of an unwilling god. Mortarian was still the greater of them. He was still the stronger, the more steeped in preternatural gifts. But now all that he felt was doubt, rocked by the remorseless fury of one who had never been anything more than fighty, self-regarding, and unreliable. All Mortarian could see was just one who wished to kill him, who would do anything, sacrifice anything, fight himself beyond physical limits, destroy his own body, his own heart, his own soul, just for the satisfaction of the oaths he had made in the void. "If you know what I did," Mortarian cried out, fighting on now through the cold fog of indecision, "then you know the truth of it. Brother, I can no longer die." It was as if a signal had been given. The Khan's bloodied head lifted, the remnants of his long hair hanging in matted clumps. "Oh, that I know," he murmured, with the most perfect contempt he had ever mustered. "But I can." Then he leapt. His broken legs still propelled him, His fractured arm still bore his blade. His blood-filled lungs and perforated heart still gave him just enough power, and he swept him close. If he had been the prime of his condition, the move might have been the hard counter, but he was already little more than a corpse held together by force of will. And so silence interposed itself, catching the Khan under his armor and impaling him deep. That, however, didn't stop him. The parry had been seen, planned for, and so he just kept coming, dragging himself up the length of the blade until the scythe jutted out of his ruptured back, and the white tiger was in tight against Mortarian's neck. For an instant, their two faces were right against one another, both cadaverous now, drained of blood, drained of life, existing only as masks unto pure vengeance. All their majesty was stripped away, scraped out across the utilitarian rockrete, leaving just the desire, the violence, the brute mechanics of despot. It only took a split second. Mortarian's eyes went wide, realizing that he couldn't wrench his brother away in time. The Khan narrowed. And that makes the difference, Jagtai spat. He snapped his dowel across, severing Mortarian's neck cleanly in an explosion of black bile, before collapsing down into the warp explosion that turned the landing stage briefly into the brightest object on the planet after the Emperor's tormented soul itself. And there you have it, guys. This is the conclusion to the brutal battle between Jagtai Khan and Mortarian, and we see that it ended up being almost an easy win for Mortarian, but the deciding factor was that somebody had more to lose. Mortarian says it himself, that he is more than his brother because he cannot die. And because of that, he's fighting with this air of arrogance, knowing that he can't die, so there's really nothing to fear. However, Jagtai Khan is mortal, and because of that, he fights harder, knowing that this could be his very last attempt at taking down the demon Primarch Mortarian. So he knows that he has to put in 120%, where you can see that Mortarian, he doesn't have to go all out because he's fighting knowing that he can't die. So because of this, his mortality is used against Mortarian, and you see that the victor at the end of the day is Jagtai Khan, but very narrowly. His body is broken, and he is literally on death's doorstep. But the demon Primarch has been banished. So let me know your thoughts down below on this fight. Again, if you want to read it, it is found within the Siege of Terra novel, Warhawk. And oh man, this just shows you how better the fights go in the Siege of Terra as opposed to those during the Horus Heresy. But that's all I got for today, guys. So again, let me know your thoughts down below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate, and I'll catch you then. Peace.